Hello and welcome to A Girl, a Guy, and a Buffy podcast. I'm one of your hosts. I'm Charles Swint.
And I'm your other host, Kate Balzer.
And we are two friends who've been watching Buffy since the beginning. We are not a rewatch podcast, so we explore the big bad themes of the show. And this podcast is full of spoilery goodness. So if you have not watched the entire series and don't want to be spoiled, press pause now. Kate, how are you?
Good, how are you doing?
I'm great. We're back.
Woohoo!
Woohoo!
Season 4.
Season 4. That's exciting.
It is.
Who knew we'd make it this far?
We're in our college years. If we're
Yes.
comparing ourselves to Buffy.
Yes, we would
Which-
be.
To be fair, I would not mind going back to college.
You know what? I actually wouldn't either. I wouldn't mind going back and redoing some things over again,
Yeah.
especially if I had the knowledge that I have now.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I
Um,
mean, I didn't have a terrible high school experience, but I wouldn't want to go back to high school. But I would definitely go back to college.
yeah, I would go back to college for sure. For sure. Yeah.
Nope, go ahead.
Okay. We're a little rusty. It's fine. It's been a while, and we appreciate you all sticking around and hanging in there while we've been on our hiatus.
Unlike Xander, we did not have to strip in order to get ourselves home.
Speak for yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm learning this too, people. I did not know. And I'm
Fresh-
disappointed. I did not
Fresh
know.
off the tracks. Hot off the presses. Breaking news. Oh my goodness. Okay, so in season 4, so as we've gone on through our past 3 seasons, we've been talking about different big bad themes that we want to explore in relationship to Buffy and the Buffyverse at large. And so this season, we have decided to look at the themes and ideas of power, control, and consequences. At the core of everything, Buffy is about what people do with power and how they've earned it, how they've abused it, how they share it, or how they suffer from it. So we're going to start to do a deep dive and unpack some of these moral and social questions about authority, power, and responsibility.
Yeah, so in this episode, we're delving into the Watchers Council. And our question is, what's wrong with the Watchers Council? Charles, what's wrong with the Watchers Council?
Well, what's not wrong with them? I mean,
Yeah.
come on, we've got a list.
We
Yeah,
do.
We actually do have a list of what's wrong with the Watchers Council. But yeah, I mean, I think it's what happens with everything.
Mhm.
It's the power. What is that? Power corrupts, but absolute power corrupts absolutely. Is that
Correct.
the
That's the
quote?
saying. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
I'm not sure who said that, but credit
I'm
to
sure
that
some
person.
very, very smart person said that.
Yes, Benjamin Franklin. No.
Yeah.
But yes, so in true fashion, we want to do some level setting about some things as we're going to be talking about this throughout the entire season. And so one of the things that I want to talk about is the word power. I mean, it's one of those words that we use all the time, and I think we have a understanding of what power is, but just wanted to give some actual definitions of the word that I think relate to Buffy and also can kind of relate to our conversations, in a larger sense, because there are actually a lot of definitions of power and a lot of different ways that that word power can be used. One of them being like the authority that is given or delegated to a person or a body. So like Buffy is given her power. The Watchers Council has, I guess they've been delegated that authority over the Slayer. There's power in the sense of physical strength. So we're talking about physical strength and force exerted on someone or something. So again, talking about Buffy's strength and her like physical strength and power and the Watchers Council. But power, simply put, and this is kind of, it's the definition, and it's kind of a definition that sort of falls into when we start talking about physics, but I think it really kind of encapsulates everything, right? Because you're talking about power is like the rate at which work can be done or energy is used or transferring. How quickly you can get something done. How quickly can Buffy stake a vamp? She has more power, therefore she can stake a vamp quicker than Willow can.
Right.
What is the power, how quickly can the Watchers Council get information to Buffy and Giles because of the resources that they have at their disposal that they don't have? So how quickly and how efficiently can we transfer information, power, knowledge, strength to one another?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So since we are talking about the Watchers Council. Kate, what is wrong with the Watchers Council?
What's wrong with the Watchers Council is that they're basically a patriarchal organization that is holding way too tight to their power when, in a lot of ways, they really don't have much power. So another aspect that we wanted to get into with our level setting is, defining patriarchy and kind of taking a little bit of a look at what patriarchy is. And so we've used this definition before in a previous episode, but we wanted to reiterate it again in case anyone hasn't listened to those episodes. And also, if it's been a while since you've heard any of our past episodes, got to remind ourselves. So this comes from thoughtco.com, and the definition of patriarchy is patriarchal describes a general structure in which men have power over women. Society is the entirety of relations of a community. A patriarchal society consists of a male-dominated power structure throughout organized society and in individual relationships. Power is related to privilege. In a system in which men have more power than women, men have some level of privilege to which women are not entitled. So again, it comes back to power. So that ties into the power definition. And having that power gives you privilege over a certain group. In this case, it's men over women. And so one thing that I also discovered in doing my research, which I thought was really interesting, is when and how patriarchy came to be, because many writers, researchers, feminists, anthropologists believe that patriarchy is a cultural construct. It's not natural. It's not an automatic thing that is meant to happen in society. Just because we have men and women does not mean that we have to have a patriarchal society. And so the research shows that it really came to be with the agrarian revolution. So as humans moved out of a nomadic life and a hunter-gatherer life into settling down and growing crops, well, then their needs and their wants changed, and it was about holding on to wealth. And so that's how roles change because it was determined that the men need to go out and do the farming. So the women had to stay at home and take care of the family and take care of the house. And that turned into that power structure out of the need to hold on to their land, their wealth, their crops. And that is what led to the development of a patriarchal society. Now, I'm sure there are other researchers that and writers and anthropologists and historians that might disagree with that, but I thought it was an interesting tract that I found in the research and makes a lot of sense to me anyway.
The more you know.
Yeah, right. And you can kind of overlay that with the Watchers Council and how the Slayer came to be, which was, I think, in some ways, I've never really thought about this enough, but it is really fascinating to think that we learn in season 7 and Get It Done that the Slayer didn't come from the powers that be. I think, at least I did, I always sort of assumed that until we found out about the Shadow Men and that the Slayer was created by humans. Now, magical humans with, supernatural powers or gifts. And then obviously the Shadow Men evolved into the Watchers Council. And so that was happening at the same time that humans were starting to settle down into that agrarian society, I'm sure. Or this was happening probably based on the few clues that we have from the show, was probably happening during the hunter-gatherer period. But as that changed and agrarian society came about, and so you have that patriarchal structure start to happen, that kind of gets overlaid into the structure between the Watchers Council and the Slayer. And it's really interesting, of course, that that gets centered in Europe,
Sure. Yeah. I mean,
you
I think
know?
there is, I mean, and that goes along with colonialism and all
Right.
of that stuff, because
Yeah.
as we see, like the Shadow Men and everything, one could say that even the idea that we could deep dive into this, but I mean, I think there's something to be said about like calling them the Shadow Man and like sort
Yeah.
of the implication of what that means. Yes, we call them the Shadow Man because of the shadow puppets and all of that stuff, but I think there's also kind of deeper implication about that because they were black people, because they were people of color. I mean, I guess we're assuming that it was in an African type village or whatever based on dressing somewhere,
Right.
on the continent, as it were. And the idea that the Watchers Council came in at some point and sort of took over these ritual practices, all of these things to colonialize and form this thing that is now the Watchers Council. It is interesting to say like, oh, well, we created this patriarchal society because we needed women to stay at home and do this. So I think it's an interesting thing, but it tracks from African societies because a lot of African societies are not necessarily patriarchal, and a lot of them are and there are some that are matriarchal.
Hmm.
And so it is interesting that they would choose a young girl to be the warrior of the people, as opposed to taking a young man to do that. In some ways, maybe they thought, well, this is a great honor for you to do this, even though making you do this against your will and chaining you to the earth and imbuing you with a demon essence. But, you know, as we see with Kendra, it is supposed to be this great honor. Or is that just the lie we tell in order to control these people, the families, the villages, and everyone else who understands what's going on in the supernatural world?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I thought about that too. It's really interesting because if you look at the role of the Slayer, it's actually very like anti-patriarchal. She's in a soldier role. She is leading a fight, but underneath that, she really has very little to no control. She typically has, at least as far as we've seen in the canon, typically tends towards male watchers. So she has this male authority figure over her life. She's given no support other than this one watcher and is basically sent out as a tool to kill. So in some ways, she's incredibly under the patriarchal system, yet in this role that's like almost anti-patriarchal
Yeah.
because it's not fitting what the sort of stereotype of patriarchal roles are, which is a woman in the home, child rearing, and the man out doing the work outside of the home.
But what it does do is it creates this idea that women are expendable and that, well, if one dies, we'll just create another one. This is like that you yourself are not important. Again, you are just the tool and you are an expendable tool, which is very much sort of the idea of most military industrial complexes is that soldiers are just expendable people.
Right, particularly frontline soldiers.
Yeah.
That's certainly one thing on our list of the things that the Watchers Council does wrong is the treatment of the Slayer like that in that way, and not thinking in the long term, and also not thinking of her as a holistic person. That if you gave the training and the support to and helped her grow and age, imagine what she could accomplish instead of just being cannon fodder. Her fighting the fight as long as she can, and then she gets killed, and oh, we got another one. But again, you're not thinking about the time it takes to train her up. I mean, even if you get a Slayer who was a potential that you found early enough to train, as we kind of saw in season 7, there's a big difference between training in the training room and actually being sent out and having the power and having to make those decisions in the moment in the fight. You're losing out on all that experience when you just let the Slayers die willy-nilly without giving them the support that they could use in order to last longer.
Vi even says when they were talking about seeing a vampire, she's like, well, I've never actually seen one before, right? I've only
Right,
seen
right.
a picture of one, and it was a very blurry picture of one. It's like, okay, come on now. With all of the resources and everything that we know about the Watchers Council, y'all have information about every single thing. But you're telling me you have pictures of the most obscure demons that are like hand drawn to perfection, but you don't have pictures of vampires that you show slayers to see what one looks like. I mean, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
You
Maybe
know,
she was so new they hadn't shown her the good picture yet.
maybe no.
But I mean, I think in some ways, as ridiculous as that statement is to what we know about the Watchers Council, I think that plays into another characteristic of what's wrong with the Watchers Council is they also dominate the Slayers through their control of and hoarding of knowledge.
Mhm.
And I mean, that so plays out in Checkpoint where Buffy calls them on it. And she's like, what are you doing with all that knowledge? Nothing. You're just sitting there. You can't tell anyone about it. You're certainly not out there, as far as we know, fighting the fight. Buffy has quit the council. So what are you all doing with that knowledge? And you're just trying to hoard it over me to get your power back when in the end you really had no power because as soon as I walked away from you, what were you doing?
Right, you became irrelevant the second Buffy leaves the
Yeah.
council and quits. They actually become very irrelevant
Yeah.
because the council's power lies in the Slayer.
Yep.
And that's it. It has no other power other than its sort of like bureaucratical power.
Yeah.
that it wields and influences, which who knows how they obtained that working behind the scenes of things, and they can't actually do anything. They don't really fight. They spend time gathering information and doing research. And that's it. Great. They are a bunch of librarians. And I am not downing librarians. Librarians are like amazing people and they're very, very important. And it is an important role. It is an important role to like archive all of that information, to have that like huge Rolodex of information. That is incredibly important because, again, going back to the definition of power, the more I am informed about something, the quicker I can make a decision about something, the quicker I can handle a situation. And so then I have the power to do something about it, as opposed to sitting in the dark like we were with Glory for that entire season of not knowing who she was and having no insight into her at all. And then the fact that the council puts Buffy through all these tests to be like, oh, well, you have to prove that you're worthy of this knowledge. I mean, no, everyone is worthy of knowledge, and especially if I'm the one that's fighting this thing. Why would you hold that against like it? Yeah, again, it's that control for relevancy.
Yeah, and well, and it's also part of a patriarchal system. I mean, being very hierarchical, being very traditional, being very controlling. They've been that way for so long that they can't even see how ineffective they are. If they would just put a team together, not just one person to work with the Slayer, and they brought in, witches and maybe part demons who have connections to the demon world. And I mean, just imagine what you could do to keep the balance between good and evil in that world if you really built a true team and built a true I don't know what the counter word is, the opposite of patriarchal society or system, but you do the opposite of that and just how much more community based and interactive and pulling from multiple sources of knowledge, how much more effective your Slayer would be and your organization.
Well, and that's exactly what Buffy does. Like Buffy
Yeah,
does just
yeah,
that. Like she pulls from other resources. She has a
right.
Watcher, she has a witch, she has an ex-demon, she has, Cordelia.
Well, and she works with her potential enemies if they have something that she needs, looking
Yeah.
at, Spike to take down Angelus and working with the initiative to take down Adam.
Yeah, she finds a way to use what she has at her disposal to
Yeah,
be the most effective thing, as opposed to being like, well, no, it's just got to be this way because this is the way that we've always done it. Well,
right.
because this is the way that we have always done it is what has gotten Slayers killed.
Yep.
And so doing it this way, we know and see she is the oldest Slayer that has ever lived. Well, I want to be careful about that because we're still not sure how old Nikki is, and that's a little,
True.
you
You
know.
don't, we don't know that for, yeah, who's the oldest or who's the
But
longest
she is definitely the
lasting.
longest. She's the longest lasting Slayer. Maybe not the oldest, but well, now she is
Yeah.
that we know of. But she is absolutely like the longest lasting Slayer.
Yeah.
And it is because of those reasons. Granted, there's a lot of resurrection that's happening that
True.
sort of, but it's because she had a team who could do that and was like, no, we're not giving up on this one. So,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
I mean, it's not just a bunch of academics and researchers. What the council does even goes so far beyond that and what they're doing to control the Slayer. I mean, the worst example being the Crucimantum. I mean, the fact that you put together this test where you take away her powers and then have her challenge a vampire. Like, what the hell is the point of that? I mean, to me, obviously, the point is either that they're going to prove that she's a strong slayer. So what? You may have lost out on someone who potentially could have been an even stronger slayer if they don't make it, or you're quote unquote weeding out the weak slayers. What's the point of that exercise in cruelty and control?
Well, and it's one of those things too, because you set up this test where this happens on the Slayer's what, 18th birthday or so what if a Slayer is called when they're like 17 and a half or whatever,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
after they're 18?
yep,
Like what do you do then? And so having this sort of arbitrary date is also a weird thing to do too, because you're not asking, either you're asking everyone to do it or you're only asking some of them to do it.
yeah.
it's not an equal playing field, and it doesn't really hold your structure well too, because it doesn't prove anything.
Right.
It doesn't prove the point that you think it does.
No, which maybe who knows, maybe that's what they fool themselves into thinking. I mean, all it proves is showing that you're a big bully, basically.
Yeah.
That using your so-called power to like literally murder young women or potentially murder young women, because you take away their powers. It's not even a fair fight. Like, what's the point of taking away the powers? There are other ways that you could test a Slayer. And if you felt like they didn't at the moment have the merit, well, then obviously you should regroup and rethink the training or whatnot, what it's about for them.
But it also goes back to, again, like this test in particular sort of negates everything that happens, because A, if you think that this person is not a good slayer for whatever reason, A, they didn't choose to be a slayer. They didn't have any control over that anyway, and neither do you. So you don't get to choose who is the slayer. And then you're saying the reason that makes them the slayer is because of these gifts that they've been imbued with. And they are tested literally every day, going out and hunting and facing these big bads and fighting demons and doing all, like, that's the test. The test is every day. So taking away the power just means, can you fight as a normal person? Like, can you
Right.
fight demons as a human? And does that make you a better slayer? Maybe. I don't know. But if you were such a good slayer, i.e., Buffy, you already have that sort of intuitive resourcefulness to fight and to survive. So I feel like that test sort of, it doesn't prove anything.
Hmm.
It's just counterproductive to everything that they're actually trying to do.
Yeah,
Um,
agreed. Well, and then the other thing they don't do, as far as we know, assuming this wasn't looked into before we come into the world in the show, is they don't try to activate more Slayers. Like, why does it only have to be one? That just seems ridiculous to put all that burden, as we've discussed in multiple episodes previously, on one young woman. And that we know basically the implication is that could happen. She could become a Slayer essentially when she starts getting her period, I think is the implication for the show.
yeah,
Could be as, young as like 10 years old. Really?
that's
Like that
crazy.
just seems utterly ridiculous. Yeah. So, I mean, the whole system is ridiculous. And the fact that they seemingly haven't looked into creating a better system where there could be more Slayers. And I understand what Buffy does in Chosen has its own consequences or implications for consequences. But at the same time, when you have a team around you to work with, I think you're going to be more successful.
And there's more checks and balances too when
Yeah, that
when you
too.
can set that up to the point of hierarchy and power and patriarchy. I think it's sort of innate to create fallible systems and systems that aren't productive so
Hmm.
that you feel useful, so that
Hmm.
you feel like you're the only one who knows how to do this. This is the way that we've done it because this is how it's got to be. Because why? Because what? Because there is a better way to do it. You just don't want to look into it. You don't want to explore it because it makes you irrelevant.
Yep.
And that would force you to find a new place in this new structure. And that
Right.
scares you.
Yep. Yes.
And that's terrifying. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, because typically traditional structures and people who lean towards tradition and hierarchy are less willing to change. They are more scared of what change can bring instead of being excited or embracing it.
right. Because that means that you have to work differently.
Yeah,
Or that maybe you're not the one always calling the shots. Or maybe
right.
that you have to, follow someone else's lead for once, and you are not in the position of privilege anymore. And it doesn't make you weaker because you're not. It just changes your position. And there's a great way to sort of share that power. And I think Buffy does that innately too with her
Hmm.
group, is that ultimately, and it's hard because I was trying to think of the other word that you were talking about, and it's not non-hierarchical because they actually do exist even in Buffy's core group with the Scoobies. There is a hierarchy for sure,
Right,
and the buck stops with Buffy. But at some point, she does, at many points, she says, "Hey, Willow, what do you think? I need you to do this. What's the plan for this? Can you make this happen?" Or Willow will step up and say, "Here's a plan that I have." Xander does that as well.
Like his idea with the rocket launcher
Yeah,
to kill the judge.
to come
So,
up with, yeah, he's got an idea, he's got a plan, and it works. Outside of the hummus defensive, I think they're pretty good at coming up with good ideas. But no,
okay, so we know not to let Oz be in charge. But aside from that,
but Oz knows when to step down. Like that's
right.
Oz brings much needed perspective to
Yes.
situations.
That's important too.
It is important to have, when you think what's more ridiculous than what we're actually talking about now. And I think Buffy was a little bit more mature or was maturing. She's a teen, she gets to mature. Like you said, they find girls who don't know anything about the world, who don't know
Right.
anything about themselves, but they have to find their way and fight something very unnatural in the world. Think about who you were at 14, 15, 16 years old, and then having to make all these choices about the world ending.
Yeah, life or death choices.
Yeah, I mean, that is an insane thing to ask of anybody.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this should be happening to people who are like 26.
Something, maybe. I don't know.
At
But
least
then
have
this,
some life experience.
yeah. I mean, and then Kennedy even says, she was like, I think I'm almost too old to be called as the next Slayer because they want you young. It's this idea of control. Are the Slayers actually being groomed?
I mean, I think there are certainly elements that seem like there's the start of it. I mean, particularly again, working with young girls, people who don't have experience, isolating the slayers, isolating the potentials, the fact that, the potentials they do find, it seems like they don't know each other. They're not all being trained the same place.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's with
And
that intention.
I don't mean it in that creepy, like,
Correct. But there are similar elements in
yeah.
how they isolate, control, hoard the knowledge. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So Slayers are groomed. I'm going on record for that. And to that point, though, like when you look at Kendra, like when you look at Kendra's behavior and how she behaves, how she can't talk to Xander. I'm not allowed to talk to men. I'm not supposed to do that. But that's a point with Kendra, but not necessarily with the other potentials that show up who have had watchers, but
Hmm.
not all of them have had watchers. Only some of them do. And
Right.
again, that's a wildly inconsistent
Yeah.
plot point in the show is that how come some of them have watchers, but the rest of them don't? It's very, very strange, very weird for that to happen.
Not that I wanted all of those people to be killed by the Caleb blowing up the Watchers Council, but it did metaphorically need to be blown up
Hmm.
in order for, I think, the Slayer and then what Buffy does to move ahead. That's for sure. Because it couldn't continue. Like she couldn't have done what she did. I mean, she could have done it, but moving ahead within that existing system of the Watchers Council, I mean, that would have been, well, it would have been interesting if it had stayed around and there had been another season to see that clash. That could have been like the conflict for the season is almost like Buffy building her own new Watchers Councils, Watchers and Slayers versus the old one. But yeah,
Yeah.
that one of them would have had to have gone
Yeah,
for
I would have
sure.
watched that season. I mean,
I
yeah,
would have too.
I mean, there would have been so much pushback from the council already about
Oh yeah.
that decision. And it's interesting that when she comes up with this plan to do this and to activate all the Slayers, and she asked Giles, "What do you think?" And he's like, "Do you really want to know?" And she's like, "I really do." And it's kind of an interesting thing of Giles giving up his power as a
Hmm.
watcher to finally acknowledge who Buffy is, what her role is, and how powerful she has become in all of this, and how she's willing to share this power with other people and change everyone's destiny forever. Not only hers and the Slayers, but the world. Like her doing this impacts the entire world in a way that no one can really foresee
Right.
what's going to happen. But it is the old guard making way for something new, and he is the last Watcher that, at least that
Yeah.
we're aware of, and him giving that sort of permission, as it were, is really interesting. So I'm wondering how much of Giles's past sort of impacted him in being a Watcher and his views on the patriarchy and that hierarchical structure that they had.
Yeah, and to the point you just made, I would say Giles was less giving permission than support.
Mm,
Because I don't think Buffy needed permission. What she was looking for was really support. And
yeah,
it was about damn time that he
yeah,
came around, but we've talked about that before.
yeah. Season 7 Giles is not
Yeah,
our
season
favorite.
6 Giles and 7 Giles, we got issues, but it was good to see him finally. You're right. He did finally come around. So it was really good to see that. But I think that's a really good point. Yeah. So delving into the Giles of it all is in spite of the direction his character took in season 6 and 7 that you and I have big issues with, and whether you think that was just poorly done on the writer's behalf or taking him in an interesting direction that in some ways made sense, even if you didn't like how he was behaving. I think overall, particularly those earlier seasons, this Buffy success is due to Giles's experience outside of the Watchers Council and the period that he had with as Ripper and his rebellion. I think it gave him a wider perspective and allowed him to grow into be the Watcher that Buffy needed in order for her to be the successful Slayer that she was.
Yeah, because he spent that time sort of dealing in this idea of chaos and breaking systems with Ethan Rayne and all of that stuff and really sort of exploring that. Once you lean into that and once you've had a taste of what it means to break apart systems and what the world can look like when those systems aren't in place, that's stuff you can't unlearn. You can't
Hmm.
unring that bell once you've heard it. So I think when you're given someone as your charge who is not the norm, who is sort of a wild card, as it were, then I think there was probably something about Giles that was like, oh, I can work with this. I can figure this out. It's going to be frustrating because again, I have to break apart my patterns of behavior and the things that I've learned. I have to like sort of deconstruct some of that stuff to be a more effective watcher for her. And when Quentin comes in, when they're doing all this, he was like, you didn't teach her how to fight. No, I taught her how to win because that's what it's about. Doesn't matter how she got there, she's still winning. And that's what I taught her to do. And that's what she's really good at is winning.
Yeah, it's incredible when you go back and rewatch how really from the beginning, Giles took one look at her and how she behaved and was like, okay, I'm gonna have to adapt. He was still kind of came off as his traditional stodgy British self, but he really worked with her in a partnership from the beginning.
Yeah.
He didn't come in as super hierarchical and controlling. Again, that's what makes their relationship, one of the parts that makes their relationship so great and allows it to grow, I think, beyond traditional Watcher and Slayer. And again, I do think Giles's behavior and how he treats her and how he respects her and her opinion and her plans, in spite of sometimes rolling his eyes at her teenage side, which is understandable
Hmm.
because that's the part that Giles in some ways can relate to the least at that point in his life. Again, he treats her as an equal partner
Right.
in that relationship and recognizes where each of their strengths lays, but at the same time knows he's there to teach her, but not in a way that's meant to control her. Obviously, if Giles had different experience, he'd be a very different watcher. So I do think it's really interesting, and I love the fact that like we do get so much background on him, and he had this rebellious period. And the other thing that shows you during, I think it is during, oh my gosh, the episode where Igon shows up. I'm just blanking on the name right now.
Oh gosh.
You are too.
Yeah, I
Okay.
did. I just
Everyone,
did.
that episode, fill in the blank here. I think that's where we learn like he kind of felt like Buffy did. Like, I mean, granted, she came to her destiny in a different way, but he basically, because of his family, was expected and destined to become a watcher. And he rebelled against that. He didn't want to. As he said, he wanted to, what was it? I forgot, what be one thing or a grocer? Was it airplane fighter pilot or something? And a
Yeah, fighter
grocer,
pilot. Yeah, a fighter
a
pilot
fighter pilot and a grocer.
or a grocer.
Yeah. And so he gets that, which I appreciate. I think that was another really great filling out of the character that they did really well, that we learned in those early years that he shared that with Buffy so that they do have an understanding with each other. They both have some of that similar experience.
Yes, the Dark Age.
The Dark Age. All I could think was lie to me, and I'm like, no, 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 that's not the right episode. Dark Age. Thank you. Yes.
Yes, again, we see those glimpses of rebellion and band candy. We see it like
Right.
it pops up over and over again, so we get a chance to really see Giles's rebellious side. We get to see his darker side, which do think makes him a really good watcher for Buffy because I think he can. I think he also keeps her, and I think part of the reason why he tries to stay fluid, but in sort of a more rigid kind of way, is that I think he knows what the other side looks like, which is why he's so like, okay, Buffy, like we've got to do it by the rules, because if you don't, this power that you have can change you, as they see when Faith shows up. And so
Hmm.
when the whole thing, when Faith kills Alan and she goes and tells Giles what happened. And Giles doesn't believe Faith because he knows. He knows that Buffy is not there, that it takes a certain type of darkness, a certain type of pain, a certain type of, something in you to take a human life. And Buffy's not there. And he
Right.
knows that.
Well, and he also, I think, shows in that his understanding. I mean, because he says, like, Buffy, this is accidents like this have happened before. This is not the first time. Like, the Watchers Council knows how to deal with this.
Yeah.
And Buffy's like, oh, I didn't think of that. She kind of was pushed, I think, because she couldn't hold it in any longer. And it's not so much that I think Giles knew that Buffy didn't have that darkness in her, although I do think that's true because what the other thing I was going to point out is it is because of who Giles is and his background and his experience that he is able to take out Ben
Hmm.
and not
Yeah.
put that burden on Buffy.
Right.
I think it ties into exactly what you're saying. I think with Faith, it was an accident. It was in the moment where the darkness comes is how she handles it. And I think you're right there that like Giles knows whatever foibles that Buffy has as a human, she wouldn't keep that from him.
Yeah, she would never lie about taking a life.
Right.
Yeah, so we would love to hear from you all. What's wrong with the Watchers Council? What is going on with them? What are
Yeah,
they
did we
going to
miss
do?
anything? Any points that we didn't cover that you want to let us know about? We'd love to hear from you. You can email us at a Buffy podcast at gmail.com or follow us on all the social media at a Buffy podcast.
All right, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, thanks.
Bye.
Bye.